Wandle is a South London river. The main headwaters are circled. It ducks 126 feet and weaves about 12 miles from the chalk downs at Croydon and Carshalton to the Thames at Wandsworth or Wandle settlement, from which the Wandle gets its name. It has moved from Babylon when Lord Nelson used to fly fish in its waters, to Babylon when it was declared an open sewer in the 1960s. Here at the westernmost spring, at Carshalton Ponds, many aspects of the Wandle's convoluted story emerge. The area has been occupied for at least 2,000 years. It was known as Alton in the Domesday Book, meaning spring enclosure. The cars arrived later, and may mean cross or cress, which was farmed locally. The Portland Stone Bridge on the lower pond may be one of the few bits of Carshalton Park mansion designed by Venetian architect Leone in the 1700s that was actually built. Now there is abundant wildlife, like this grey heron, but it is watching over a mill race. This cascade until the 1920s powered a water wheel that wound flour, and then became part of the hydroelectric power supply to the local manor, Stone Court. And this is where, in the dry summer months, most of the water in Carshalton Ponds actually comes from. Beddington Sewerage Treatment Works welcomes Croydon's effluent, cleans it, and then discharges it back into a branch of the Wandle near Beddington Corner. The outflow is generally very good for wildlife, although the distinct Wandle aroma never quite disappears. The water flows down to the Goats Bridge, where, when required, it is pumped up through a pipe to fill Carshalton Ponds, from an outlet under the Honeywood Museum. The treated effluent that isn't pumped back up to Carshalton flows downriver from the Goat Bridge towards Mitcham. So most of the water in the Wandle, particularly in the summer months, comes from the Croydon area. Not all of the water comes via the sewerage works. In prehistoric times, the Wandle extended beyond the North Downs through the Mertsome Gap. The River Mull in Surrey then drove through its own gap in the chalk and captured much of the headwaters. But where the rain percolates through the chalk of the North Downs and hits the impenetrable London clay, springs do still appear. The only visible spring in Croydon is this opened up culvert running through Wandle Park. It emerges near Reeves Corner, also the start of the former Surrey Iron Railway. This was thought to be the oldest public railway in the world, but actually missed out by 5 years, to a line in Wakefield that opened in 1798. Croydon Tramlink now runs along the Wandle Valley, following the course of the old Iron Railway. A more picturesque spring line feeds Wagon Ponds, just outside Croydon. Like Carshalton Ponds a couple of miles to the west, these springs were harnessed to provide water power for a flour mill and also to grow watercress. From Waddon Ponds, this branch of the Wandle flows west through Beddington Park, formerly Carey Manor. Sir Walter Raleigh's wife, Elizabeth, was Carey. They were married in secret without royal permission and were sent to the Tower of London, but later released. After Sir Walter's very final trip to the Tower, legend has it that Elizabeth took his severed head away in a red bag and buried it here, at the headwaters of the Wandle. In fact, no one really knows what happened to his remains, and they were a devoted couple. Sadly, the manor was sold by a shyster lawyer to pay off Charles Carey's gambling debts in the 1850s. The Carshalton branch of the Wandle is sometimes referred to as the Rye, meaning ripple, and has nothing to do with the proximity of either Elizabeth Carey or Emma Hamilton. The eastern and western branches meet here at the weir near Wilderness Island. I don't know why this heron looks so grumpy. There are plenty of fish in the river as it reverts back to a chalk stream, such as chub, dace, trout, roach, gudgeon, rudd and barbel. This little egret seems much more in the spirit of Sir Horatio. I do wonder how Emma Hamilton felt about Admiral Nelson going fishing. "You must get so little time to fish at sea, my lord." At Mitcham, the National Trust takes over. One of the National Trust's first purchases. Watermeads is a nature reserve and was a cricket bat farm. It was planted with willow between the wars. It was also the site of snuff mills, where water power was used to grind down tobacco. Water also attracted tanneries. These had a very detrimental effect on the water quality, as the leather was treated with urine and other noxious substances, which were discharged into the river. The Wandle's fall of 126 feet in 12 miles means that the average flow is high, enough to power over 90 mills. But the speed of the water and the many artificial water barriers mean that fish find it hard to travel upstream. Birds have no such problems. And ring-necked parakeets are everywhere. Also in trust to the nation is the lovely Morton Hall Park. Until the dissolution of the monasteries by Henry VIII, it was owned by Westminster Abbey, and then bought by George Garth. He was clerk of the Petty Bag and a member of Parliament. The clerk was a sort of 14th century law society and kept an eye on solicitors, attorneys and officers of the court. You can guess where they kept their papers. The Garths remained lord of the manor until 1872. The managed wetlands slow the river current and free it from concrete embankments, creating a safe environment for young fish and amphibians. This is Morton's only occupied castle. Water is not the only current flowing down the Wandle Valley. The 275 kilovolt YYU electrical power route from Bennington to Wimbledon substation follows the line of the river because power companies try to avoid running cables over property for reasons of access and safety. The last functional water wheel here on the river also generates current, enough to power a motor turning a potter's wheel. The potter does have a beard, and his output is well worth a visit. This is Merton Abbey Mills. Established by Huguenot silk throwers in the early 1700s, the textile printing works was taken over by bearded arts and crafts guru William Morris in 1881. He made his brilliant rough cotton calico prints here. Liberty & Co. also printed textiles next door and eventually took over the whole complex, operating it until 1972. Some of us also remember the huge paper mill that stood here. It was the waters near to Merton Abbey that Nelson actually fished when he cohabited with Emma and a very mature husband. The Wandle flows from here almost directly north towards the Thames. Nelson may also have fished the Graveney, which joins the Wandle here near Hayden's Road. Just downstream is Wimbledon substation. The ring-necked parakeets, Ethiopian old gold eyes, red beaks and green plumage, could make them a mascot of one of South London's many subcultures, Wandle Roots. Maybe this is the river's most iconic scene, mostly because it is viewed by many as they pass by, from the train to Waterloo or Clapham Junction or home. But for me, it also exhibits the spirit of the river, the way it kind of heroically rolls on through the many degradations the city has thrown at it. It survives, like we do. I suppose you can also interpret it as a triptych. The Wandle is home to many grey wagtails, and you can see kingfishers this far downstream. I've not been quick enough to photograph one though, sadly. This was an iconic site on the Wandle, the Ram Brewery, now the Ram Quarter, decimated it more like. A cormorant with a greater spotted shopping trolley, beginning to realise it's not in the right queue for the checkout. And this is where the Wandle turns tidal. The Tidal Bell was installed in the 1980s to remind people of the natural environment. The idea is now catching on. We arrive at the tidal last few hundred metres of the Wandle, where it meets the Thames at Wandsworth. The Surrey Iron Railway also terminated next door. Across the Thames, Fulham glistens as the Wandle, its many works done, finally gives in to something bigger.